Mr. Alexander Stone couldn't sleep again. He sat up in his enormous bed and looked around his bedroom. It was bigger than most people's entire houses. The ceiling was so high you could fit 3 Christmas trees stacked on top of each other. Golden curtains hung from the tall windows. Paintings worth millions of dollars covered the walls. Everything was perfect. Everything was expensive. Everything was lonely. Alexander threw off his silk sheets and walked to the window. The sun wasn't up yet. The sky was that strange color between night and morning, dark purple with tiny hints of orange sneaking in from far away. His mansion sat on a hill, surrounded by gardens that went on forever. Fountains, marble statues, rose bushes trimmed into perfect shapes. But no laughter, no voices, no golems. His wife had left him 2 years ago. She took her smiles, her perfume, and her promises with her. She left behind only one thing, a baby boy named Lucas. Alexander loved Lucas. At least, he thought he did. But love felt like a word he'd read in a book somewhere, not something he actually knew how to do. He had nannies for Lucas, expensive ones from fancy schools. He had cooks, drivers, gardeners, and maids, people everywhere, doing everything. But Alexander had never felt more alone in his entire life. His chest felt tight. The walls of his beautiful bedroom seemed to press closer. He needed air. Alexander grabbed his robe and walked through the silent halls of his mansion. His footsteps echoed on the marble floors. Every sound felt too loud in the emptiness. Past the dining room with its table that could seat 20 people. Past the library with shelves reaching toward the sky. Past the grand staircase that spiraled down like something from a fairy tale. He opened the heavy front door and stepped outside. The cold morning air hit his face like a splash of water. He took a deep breath. Better, a little better. The garden stretched out before him, still wrapped in shadows. The fountain bubbled quietly. Somewhere far away, a bird started singing, announcing that morning would come soon. Alexander walked down the stone path, his slippers crunching softly on the gravel. He didn't know where he was going. He just knew he needed to move, needed to feel something besides a heavy emptiness that filled his chest. That's when he saw it. At first, his brain couldn't make sense of what his eyes were showing him. There was someone on the garden bench. His garden bench, the white marble one underneath the willow tree. He walked closer, his heart starting to beat faster. A woman was sleeping there. Her head was tilted back against the bench. Her arms were wrapped around something. Alexander's blood turned to ice. She was holding a baby. His baby. What? The word came out as a whisper, strangled in his throat. He moved closer, almost running now. The gravel crunched loudly under his feet, but the woman didn't wake up. His mind raced with terrible thoughts. Was Lucas okay? Why was he outside? Who was this woman? Was she stealing his son? But as he got closer, close enough to see clearly in the dim morning light, everything changed. He recognized her. Maria. Maria was his maid. She'd worked in his house for almost a year. Quiet Maria, who cleaned the floors until they sparkled. Maria, who always said yes, sir, and no, sir, with her eyes looking down. Maria, who he barely noticed because he barely noticed anyone anymore. And there she was, asleep on a cold marble bench, holding Lucas like he was made of glass and golden stars. Alexander stopped walking. He couldn't move. He could only stare. Lucas was wrapped in an old shawl, nothing like the expensive blankets Alexander bought for him. The shawl was faded blue with tiny holes in it. It looked thin. It looked worn. But Lucas was wrapped up tight inside it, sleeping peacefully. His little chest rose and fell with easy breaths. His tiny hand curled into a fist near his mouth. He looked safe. He looked warm. He looked loved. Maria's arms held him close to her chest. Even in her sleep, her grip was gentle but firm, protective. Her face looked tired. So tired. There were dark circles under her eyes. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her hair had fallen out of its usual neat bun. But there was something else on her face, too. Something that made Alexander's throat feel tight and strange. Peace. She looked peaceful. Alexander stood there, frozen, as 1,000 questions exploded in his mind like fireworks. Why was Maria outside with Lucas? Why was Lucas not in his nursery with the expensive baby monitor and the nightlight shaped like a moon? Where was the nanny? He paid her a fortune to watch Lucas at night. Why was his son wrapped in an old shawl instead of his designer blankets? Had Maria taken Lucas? Was she trying to run away with him? But even as that thought formed, Alexander knew it was wrong. Maria wasn't running. She was just sitting there, sleeping, looking exhausted and peaceful, and somehow more like a mother than anyone Alexander had ever seen. A cold wind blew through the garden. It made the willow branches dance and whisper. Maria shivered in her sleep and pulled Lucas closer, tucking the shawl more tightly around him. Lucas made a small sound like a kitten and snuggled deeper into her arms. Alexander's hands started shaking. All his life, he believed in things he could count. Money, houses, cars, investments, things that made sense on paper, things that proved you were successful, things that showed the world you'd won. But standing there in his enormous garden, watching his maid sleep on a cold bench with his baby in her arms, Alexander realized something that terrified him. He didn't understand anything at all. He didn't understand why this moment felt more real than anything in his mansion. He didn't understand why tears were burning in his eyes. He didn't understand why his chest ached like someone had reached inside and squeezed his heart. Most of all, he didn't understand why the sight of his son looking so safe, so loved, so protected in the arms of a poor maid made him feel like he'd been doing everything wrong his entire life. The sky was getting lighter. Pink and orange now, painted clouds. Beurre sans doute. Morning was coming, and Alexander Stone, billionaire, owner of a mansion on a hill, stood in his garden and realized he had no idea what to do next. His son was safe. That much was clear. Lucas breathed softly, dreaming baby dreams held by arms that obviously cared. But why? Why was Maria here? What had happened? What story had unfolded in the night, while Alexander slept alone in his enormous bed? He needed answers. He needed to understand. Alexander took a step forward, then another. His heart pounded. His mouth felt dry. He reached out his hand toward Maria's shoulder, ready to wake her, ready to demand explanations. But something made him stop. Maria's face, even tired, even sleeping on cold marble, looked more content than Alexander had felt in years. And Lucas, wrapped in that old thin shawl, looked more peaceful than he ever did in his expensive nursery. What if the answer was something Alexander didn't want to hear? What if the truth was something that would change everything? His hand hung in the air, shaking, while the morning sun climbed higher and the moment stretched out like a string about to snap. What happens next would change Alexander Stone's life forever. He just didn't know it yet. Alexander's hand touched Maria's shoulder. Gentle, careful. Maria? His voice came out as a whisper. Her eyes opened slowly. For a moment, she looked confused, like someone waking from a beautiful dream into a confusing reality. Then she saw Alexander standing over her. Her eyes went wide with fear. Mr. Stone. She sat up quickly but carefully, so carefully, making sure not to jostle Lucas. I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean to. I was just... Stop. Alexander held up his hand. His voice wasn't angry. It was something else. Something softer. Something that surprised even him. Just tell me what happened. Why are you out here with my son? Maria looked down at Lucas, still sleeping peacefully in her arms. Her eyes filled with tears. He was cold, sir. So cold. What do you mean cold? His nursery has the best heating system money can buy. It broke, sir. Maria's voice shook. Last night, it broke. Alexander felt his stomach drop. What? I was finishing the cleaning on the second floor. It was very late, maybe midnight. I heard Lucas crying. Maria's words tumbled out faster now. Not his normal cry, sir. A different cry. A scared cry. A cold cry. Alexander's jaw tightened. Where was Miss Patricia? Patricia was a night nanny. He paid her thousands of dollars a month. She left early, sir. She said her sister was sick. She asked me to listen for Lucas, just for tonight. She said she'd be back by morning. Alexander's hands curled into fists. Patricia had left. Just left, without telling him, without making sure someone qualified was watching his son. I went to check on him, Maria continued. When I opened the nursery door, sir, the room was like ice, like a freezer. I could see my breath. And Lucas was crying in his crib, his little lips turning blue. Alexander's heart stopped. Blue lips. His son. His Lucas. I ran to him. I picked him up. He was shaking, sir, shaking so hard. Tears rolled down Maria's cheeks now. I grabbed all his blankets and wrapped him up. I held him close. But the room was too cold. It wouldn't warm up. I tried the heater. It made a strange noise and then nothing. Just dead. Why didn't you wake me? Alexander's voice cracked. Maria looked away. I tried, sir. I knocked on your door. I knocked hard. But you didn't answer. The sleeping pills, sir, you take them sometimes. I know because I clean your bathroom. I saw the empty bottle. Alexander remembered. Last night, he couldn't sleep. He'd taken 2 pills instead of 1. He'd been desperate for peace, for rest, for escape from his own thoughts. His sleeping pills had almost cost his son his life. I didn't know what to do, Maria whispered. I called the emergency repair service, but they said they couldn't come until morning. I called Miss Patricia, but she didn't answer. I thought about calling the hospital, but Lucas had stopped shaking. He was getting warmer in my arms. I needed to keep him warm until someone could fix the heater. So you came outside? Alexander couldn't understand. It's colder outside than inside. Maria shook her head. No, sir, not under the willow tree. The house blocks the wind here. And I have this. She touched the old shawl wrapped around Lucas. My grandmother made this for me many years ago. It's made from special wool. Very warm. I've had it since I was a little girl. Alexander stared at the faded shawl, the thin, worn, hole-filled shawl that had saved his son's life. I wrapped him in all his blankets first, Maria explained. Then I wrapped my shawl around everything, and I held him close to my heart. Body heat, sir. Skin to skin, almost. Like when her voice broke. Like when my daughter was born. Alexander went very still. Your daughter? Maria hadn't meant to say it. He could see that on her face. She looked like she wanted to take the words back, to stuff them back inside where they'd been locked away. I didn't know you had a daughter, Alexander said softly. Had, sir. Maria's voice was barely a whisper. I had a daughter. The morning sun was fully up now, painting everything gold. Birds sang in the trees. The fountain sparkled. But all Alexander could hear was that one word. Had. What was her name? He asked. Sophia. Maria smiled, but it was the saddest smile Alexander had ever seen. She had dark curls like Lucas, and she laughed at everything. Even when she was sick, she would try to smile. Sick? Alexander's throat felt tight. Pneumonia, the doctor said. Her lungs filled with fluid. She needed medicine. Special medicine. Maria's tears fell on the shawl, soaking into the old wool. But we had no money. My husband worked in a factory. I cleaned houses. We saved everything we could, but it wasn't enough. Not enough for the medicine. Not enough to save her. How old was she? 2 years old, sir. Just 2. Alexander felt like someone had punched him in the stomach. 2 years old. Just a baby. Just a little girl who laughed at everything. My husband, Carlos, he tried to work extra hours. He took on dangerous jobs to make more money. There was an accident at the factory. The machines. Maria closed her eyes. They said he didn't feel pain. They said it was quick. But he died trying to save our daughter. And then, 3 weeks later, Sophia died too, because we couldn't afford the medicine. Alexander couldn't speak. He couldn't breathe. Here was Maria, a woman who'd lost everything. Her husband, her child, her entire world. And she'd spent the night on a cold bench protecting his son. I had nothing after that, Maria said quietly. No family, no home, just this shawl and memories. I came to this city looking for work. You hired me 1 year ago. I was so grateful. Sir, you gave me a job when no one else would. You gave me a roof, food, a purpose. I barely spoke to you, Alexander said, shame burning in his chest. I didn't even know your full name. Maria Elena Rosales, she said, and you don't have to feel bad, sir. You gave me something more important than conversation. You gave me Lucas. Alexander looked at her, confused. Maria gazed down at the sleeping baby in her arms. When I hold him, sir, I feel like maybe God gave me a second chance. Not to have my Sophia back. I know she's gone. But to love again. To care for someone small and helpless. To use what I learned as a mother to protect this beautiful boy. She kissed Lucas's forehead gently. When I heard him crying last night, cold and scared, I didn't think. I just acted, because that's what mothers do. We protect. We sacrifice. We give everything we have, even if it's just an old shawl and a warm hug. Alexander knelt down beside the bench. For the first time in his life, he knelt before someone he'd always considered beneath him. You saved his life, he said, his voice thick with emotion. The heater broke. Patricia left. I was unconscious from sleeping pills. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't heard him, if you hadn't cared enough to, he couldn't finish. The terrible thought was too heavy. But I was there, Maria said simply. God put me there. Or fate. Or luck. Whatever you believe in, sir. I was there, and that's all that matters. Alexander looked at this woman. Really looked at her. For the first time, he saw the strength in her tired eyes. The kindness in her worn face. The depth of her love for a child that wasn't even hers. He'd spent millions on paintings and cars and things he didn't need. He'd hired people to do everything for him. He'd built walls of money and marble around his heart, thinking that's what safety looked like. But real safety, real protection, real love, it was sleeping on a cold bench wrapped in an old shawl, held by arms that knew what it meant to lose everything. I'm sorry, Alexander said, and he meant it more than he'd ever meant anything. I'm sorry for not seeing you. I'm sorry for not knowing you. I'm sorry that you lost Sophia and Carlos. I'm sorry that the world was so cruel to someone so good. Maria's eyes widened. In all her life, no rich person had ever apologized to her. And I'm sorry, Alexander continued, that I've been a kind of father who doesn't even hear his son crying in the night, that I have to pay people to love my child because I don't know how, that I almost lost him because I was too busy drowning in my own loneliness to stay awake. Lucas stirred in Maria's arms. His little eyes opened. He looked up at Maria and smiled, that gummy, toothless, perfect baby smile that makes the whole world right. Mana, Lucas babbled, not a real word yet, but close enough to break Alexander's heart into pieces. Maria's tears fell faster. No, little one, I'm not your mama. I'm just Maria. But Lucas reached up his tiny hand and touched her face, like he was saying, you're my mama where it counts, in the ways that matter. Alexander watched them, this wealthy man who had nothing, watching a poor woman who had everything that mattered. The sun climbed higher. The garden grew warm. And Alexander Stone understood something for the first time in his life. Money couldn't buy what Maria had given freely. Pure, selfless, life-saving love. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late for him to learn. Maria, he said, his voice steady despite his shaking hands. I need to ask you something. And I need you to know I've never meant anything more seriously in my entire life. Maria looked at him, confused, holding Lucas close. Will you come inside? Alexander asked. Not as my maid, as my family. Will you teach me how to be the kind of father, the kind of man who stays awake when his son needs him? Maria stared at him, speechless, while the morning sun painted everything gold, and baby Lucas laughed, and the whole world held its breath. Maria saved Lucas's life with nothing but an old shawl and a mother's heart. Now Alexander wants her to be family. But can a mansion built on money become a home built on love? Maria didn't answer right away. She looked at Alexander kneeling before her on the garden path. She looked at his expensive robe, his mansion rising behind him like a castle, his life of luxury that seemed so far from her own. Sir, she said carefully, I don't understand. You want me to be family? Yes. Alexander's voice didn't shake. I want you to help me raise Lucas, not as a maid who cleans and cooks, but as someone who loves him, as someone he needs. But I'm nobody, sir. I have no education, no money, no. You have what I don't have, Alexander interrupted. You have a heart that knows how to love. You saved my son's life last night with nothing but an old shawl and your own warmth. What does that make you, Maria? It makes you the richest person I know. Maria's hands trembled. What would people say? A billionaire and his maid raising a child together? They would talk. They would judge. Let them talk. Alexander stood up and held out his hand. I've spent my whole life caring what people think. Look where it got me, alone in a mansion so big I can't hear my own son crying. I'm done with that life, Maria. I'm done being that man. Maria looked at his outstretched hand. Then she looked down at Lucas, now wide awake and playing with the worn edges of her grandmother's shawl. Okay, she whispered. Okay, Mr. Stone. I'll help you. Not Mr. Stone, Alexander said, smiling for the first time in what felt like years. Just Alexander. And thank you, Maria. Thank you for giving me a second chance. The next few days changed everything. Alexander fired Miss Patricia, the nanny who'd abandoned Lucas. He called repair people to fix the heater immediately. No waiting, no delays. He had them install backup heaters in every room, just in case. But the biggest changes weren't in the mansion. They were in Alexander himself. He moved Maria into the guest room next to the nursery. It was a beautiful room with its own bathroom, soft carpet, and windows overlooking the garden. Maria cried when she saw it. She'd never had her own room before. Not like this. This is too much, she said, touching the silky curtains. It's not enough, Alexander replied. Not for what you've done. Not for what you mean to Lucas. He gave Maria new clothes, not uniforms, but real clothes. Soft sweaters, comfortable pants, a warm coat for cold mornings. Maria tried to refuse, but Alexander insisted. You're not my employee anymore, he said. You're family, and family takes care of each other. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments. Maria taught Alexander how to hold Lucas properly, supporting his head, keeping him close to your heart where he could hear it beating. She showed him how to make bottles at the right temperature, testing the milk on his wrist first. She taught him the difference between Lucas's cries, the hungry cry, the tired cry, the I just want to hug cry. Alexander was clumsy at first. He dropped the bottle and milk went everywhere. He put Lucas's diaper on backward. He panicked when Lucas coughed, thinking something was terribly wrong. But Maria was patient. She laughed, a warm, musical sound that made the mansion feel less empty. She guided Alexander's hands. She encouraged him when he felt hopeless. You're learning, she said. That's all that matters. You're trying. One night, Lucas woke up crying at 2 a.m. Alexander heard it, really heard it, because he'd stopped taking sleeping pills. He jumped out of bed and ran to the nursery. Maria was already there in her nightgown, reaching for Lucas. But Alexander gently touched her arm. Let me try, he said. Maria stepped back and watched. Alexander picked up his son. Lucas was hot, his little face red and scrunched up in anger. Alexander remembered what Maria taught him. He held Lucas against his chest, swaying gently. He hummed a tune, not a real song, just notes strung together. Lucas's crying slowed, then stopped. His little body relaxed. He made soft baby sounds and closed his eyes. Alexander looked at Maria with wonder. He's going back to sleep. Maria smiled, because he knows you love him. Babies feel that, Alexander. They feel love more than anything else. Alexander felt tears on his cheeks. I never knew I could do this. I never thought I was capable of being enough. You always were enough, Maria said softly. You just needed someone to show you. Weeks turned into months. The mansion transformed. It wasn't a cold museum anymore. It was a home. Maria hung photos on the walls, pictures of Lucas laughing, playing, growing. She put toys in the living room, even though they made the space look messy. She opened curtains that had been closed for years, letting sunshine flood every room. She cooked meals in a huge kitchen, not fancy food, but simple, warm dishes that smelled like love. Alexander ate at the kitchen table with Maria and Lucas, instead of alone in the dining room. They laughed. They talked. They became something neither of them had expected. They became a family. Lucas grew bigger. He learned to crawl, then walk. His first steps were toward Maria, his little arms outstretched. But his second steps were toward Alexander, and when his father caught him, Lucas laughed like it was the best game in the world. Lucas's first clear word was mama, looking at Maria. His second word was dada, looking at Alexander. Both of them cried happy tears. One year after the morning on the bench, Alexander did something he'd never imagined. He gathered everyone in the garden, the same garden where he'd found Maria sleeping with Lucas. He'd hired a photographer, but not for fancy portraits, just to capture a moment. Alexander knelt down, just like he'd done a year ago, but this time he took Maria's hand. "Maria Elena Rosales," he said, his voice strong and sure. "You saved my son. But more than that, you saved me. You taught me that love isn't something you buy. It's something you give every single day in 1,000 small ways." Maria's eyes filled with tears. "I'm not asking you to marry me," Alexander continued, and Maria let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "I know your heart still belongs to Carlos. I respect that. I honor that. But I am asking you to let me make this official. I want to adopt you as Lucas's legal co-guardian. I want the world to know that you're not my employee, not my servant, not my charity case. You're his mother in every way that counts. And you're my family." Maria couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears streaming down her face. Alexander pulled out a small box. Inside was a necklace, a simple silver chain with 2 charms. One was the letter L for Lucas. The other was the letter S for Sophia. "Your daughter will always be part of our family," Alexander said, "because she made you who you are. And who you are is the most important person in our lives." Maria threw her arms around Alexander and sobbed. Big, healing sobs that released years of grief and loneliness. Lucas, now a toddler, wrapped his little arms around both of them. "Nana, dada," he shouted happily, not understanding the moment but feeling the love in it. Years passed. Lucas grew into a bright, kind boy who loved books and bugs and helping Maria in the kitchen. He called her Mama Maria, and he called Alexander simply Dad. The mansion was full of noise now, laughter, music, the sound of running feet. Maria sang while she cooked. Alexander played games with Lucas on the floor. They had movie nights, curled up on the couch under blankets. Sometimes, late at night, Alexander would find Maria sitting on the garden bench, that same white marble bench where everything changed. She'd be looking up at the stars, her hand touching the necklace with 2 charms. "Thinking about Sophia?" Alexander would ask gently. "Always," Maria would say, "but also thinking how strange life is, how tragedy and joy can live together, how losing her led me here, to Lucas, to you, to this life I never imagined. Do you think she'd be happy? That you found happiness again?" Maria would smile through tears. "Yes, I think she'd want me to love again, just like Carlos would. They want me to have this second chance." Alexander would sit beside her, and they'd watch the stars together. 2 broken people who'd found healing in the most unexpected way. One night, when Lucas was 7 years old, he asked a question at dinner. "Mama Maria, why do some kids have one mom and one dad? But I have a dad and a Mama Maria." Maria and Alexander exchanged glances. "Well," Maria said carefully, "families come in all different shapes, mi amor. Some have a mom and dad. Some have 2 moms or 2 dads. Some have grandparents raising them. Some have 1 parent. What makes a family isn't how it looks. It's how much love is inside it. So we're a family because we love each other?" Lucas asked. "Exactly," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then we're the best family," Lucas announced happily, taking a big bite of Maria's homemade bread. "Because we have so much love. Like a million loves." Maria laughed. 1,000,000 loves. I like that. More than 1,000,000, Alexander added, ruffling Lucas's hair. More than all the money in the world. And it was true. Alexander had finally learned what Maria had known all along, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars or mansions or things you can hold in your hand. True wealth is measured in moments like these, in shared meals and bedtime stories and hugs that last a little too long, in sacrifices made without expecting anything back, in second chances and healing hearts and love that grows where there was once only emptiness. The bench in the garden still stood under the willow tree, a quiet reminder of the night that changed everything. Sometimes Maria would wrap Lucas in her grandmother's old shawl, carefully mended now, treasured, and tell him the story of how love saved his life. And Lucas would listen with wide eyes, understanding even at his young age that he was the luckiest boy in the world, not because his father was rich, but because he was loved by two people who'd learned that love was the only treasure worth having. If this story touched your heart, please like this video. Your likes help us share more stories about love, family, and second chances. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Maybe it's a single parent working hard. Maybe it's someone who feels alone. Maybe it's someone who needs to remember that families come in all shapes, and love is what makes them real. Subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories. We share tales that remind you what really matters in life. Not money or success, but the people who love you and the moments you share together. Comment below. What does family mean to you? Have you ever experienced a moment that changed everything? We'd love to hear your stories. Remember, true wealth is measured in love, not dollars. And sometimes, the richest hearts sleep on cold benches, not in marble halls. Thank you for reading. Thank you for caring. Thank you for believing in the power of love. See you in the next story.